Caucasians in the Middle East, genotype and phenotype. But before we get too deep into the video, first I want to tell you guys about my social media platforms. So I have a Clubhouse account and we can actually talk to one another on it. I also host Clubhouse rooms every now and then where I might talk about history and genetics of the Middle East and Africa. I have a Twitter page, a Facebook account, and a Facebook page, as well as a Instagram, all titled The Hebrew of Israel. And what I typically do on these platforms is post upcoming videos as well as slides for my presentations. And so just be on the lookout for all of that on my social media platforms. And if you want to support me financially for the channel, you can look at my Patreon as well as my PayPal and my GoFundMe. And with all of that out of the way, let's begin with the video. What is the genetic makeup of the Middle East? Genetically speaking, West Asian ancestry or Middle Easterners are Caucasians. Their genome is related to peoples of the Caucasus. This is from human ancestry correlates with language and reveals that race is not an objective genomic classifier. And this paper reads, Western Asian ancestry correlates with Northeast Caucasian, Northwest Caucasian, and Kartvelen, that's another Caucasian group, language families, as well as the Armenian branch of the Indo-European language family. So basically, West Asian ancestry is linked to Caucasian ancestry. To expound this point, West Asian ancestry currently exists at its highest frequency in populations from the Caucasus Mountains and the Levant, and is the major ancestry in Abkhazian, Georgian, and Druze samples. So whenever you're dealing with West Asian ancestry in any type of a DNA test, it's basically going to be using Caucasian populations, peoples from the Caucasus. And so continuing with the paper, it reads, 8. The correlation of West Asian ancestry with Northeast Caucasian, Northwest Caucasian, and Kartvelian languages is consistent with the phylolinguistic hypothesis that these three groups of languages are related in a larger grouping called Ibero-Caucasian. And here's just a map just detailing when it comes to the Middle East and its languages. So here in blue is the Caucasian languages, in orange is the Indo-European languages, and in green is the Altaic languages. But in ancient times, Anatolia would have had Indo-Europeans as well, the Hittites. But right now it's controlled by Turkic-speaking peoples. So here's another DNA paper dealing with Middle Eastern populations and their genome. This paper is called Reanalysis of Whole Genome Sequence Data from 279 Ancient Eurasians Reveals Substantial Ancestral Heterogeneity. Now, dealing with the part with West Asian peoples, it reads, the two Georgian hunter-gatherers did not group with the European hunter-gatherers. The Georgian hunter-gatherers averaged 45.8% Western Asian and 37.7% Southern Asian ancestries, with only 4.9% Northern European and no Southern European ancestries. Both Y-DNA haplogroups were J. The ancient Iranians were characterized through the late Neolithic period by predominantly Southern Asian ancestry. The portion of Western Asian ancestry doubled through the Iron Age. The ancient Armenians resembled the Georgian hunter-gatherers in having a mixture of West Asian and South Asian ancestries. In the ancient Armenians, relative to the Georgian hunter-gatherers, Northern European, Southern European, and Arabian ancestries increased in the Copper Age. In the ancient Iranians, the portion of West Asian ancestry doubled through the Iron Age, suggesting gene flow from the Caucasus rather than the Levant, with smaller amounts of Arabian and Southern Indian ancestries suggest gene flow from the West and the East, respectively. So we see West Asian ancestry double in the Iron Age, and that gene flow was coming from the Caucasus. So that's very important to note. So again, here's just a map dealing with the modern day when it comes to people who speak the various languages of the Middle East. And Indo-European, specifically Iranian, is heavy in the Middle East. I don't know if too many people know this, but yes, the Middle East is not just Semitic speakers. It has Indo-European speakers. It's not just Semites there. You have definitely non-Semitic populations. So this paper also deals with the genetic breakdown of Middle Easterners. This paper is called Projecting Ancient Ancestry in Modern-Day Arabians and Iranians. A Key Role of the Past Exposed Arabo-Persian Gulf on Human Populations. So we're going to be dealing with E right here. By the way, not haplogroup E, but from this chart E. And what it shows right here, E, is that most of the populations in Anatolia, the Caucasus, and Iran, they have Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry. And we talked about the Caucasus hunter-gatherers quite a bit. Caucasus hunter-gatherers, they're some of the oldest populations we found with haplogroup J. Half of the Proto-Indo-Europeans have Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry. I mean, they literally made the Europeans in a sense. And light skin originated with Caucasus hunter-gatherers. So peoples of Anatolia, the Caucasus, and Iran have, of course, high amounts of Caucasus hunter-gatherer ancestry, as you can see. So Caucasian populations in the Caucasus and Near Easterners are genetically extremely close to each other. So this paper, Parallel Evolution of Genes and Languages in the Caucasus Region. It's going to break that down. So it says, we also employed a lexical statistical approach to reconstruct the history of the languages of the North Caucasian family spoken by the Caucasus populations. We found a different major haplogroup to be prevalent in each of the four sets of populations that occupy distinct geographical regions and belong to different linguistic branches. The haplogroup frequencies correlated with geography and even more strongly with language. Within haplogroups, a number of haploclusters were shown to be specific to individual populations and languages. The data suggests a direct origin of Caucasus male lineages from the Near East, followed by high levels of isolation, purification, and genetic drift. In situ comparison of genetic and linguistic reconstructions covering the last few millennia showed striking correspondences between the topology and dates of the respective gene and language trees with documented historical events. Overall, in the Caucasus range, or in the Caucasus region, unmatched levels of gene language coevolution occurred within geographical isolated populations, probably due to its mountainous terrain. Again, haplogroup J2A 4B *M67 comprise 51 through 79% of the Y chromosomes in the English and 3 Chechnyan populations, Northeast Caucasus, NAC, and linguistic group. Finally, haplogroup J1*M267 comprised 44 through 99% of the Southeast Caucasus Dagestani linguistic group. So basically, Caucasian populations of the NAC Dagestani groups have some of the highest amounts of haplogroup J in the world. Here is, you can see right here, these are Northeast Caucasians with the highest amount of haplogroup J, both J1 and J2. So that's very important to note. So continuing, it reads, the MDS plot of pairwise genetic distance showed strong regional clustering separating populations from Europe, the Near East, and the Caucasus, with samples from the Caucasus grouping closer to the Near East samples than to the European ones. Of those three clusters, the Caucasus appeared to be the most diverse, with distinguishable subgroup variation within it. The first subgroup included the Dagestani speakers, the second NAC speakers, and the third the Abzaho-Abadjihi speakers. The plot illustrates both the common Near Eastern background of all Caucasus populations and the pronounced intra-Caucasus genetic differentiation into grouping that corresponded well with their linguistic affinity. So basically what we see is that Caucasus populations and Near Eastern populations are extremely close to each other genetically. You see right here all the various groups like the English and the Chechnyans, and then you see right here with people like Iranians and Armenians and such. These populations are so close to the point that it's basically showing that Near Easterners could, in a sense, be just a subset of Caucasians. And they're talking about when it came to the linguistic tree and the genetic tree, basically their genome, the way it's broken down, fits with the linguistic tree. So that's also something very interesting when dealing with them. See English and Chechnyans right here, Dagestanis. So comparing genetic and linguistic findings, we now propose a model of the evolution of Caucasian populations. The final tree was obtained by merging the genetic clusters with the background linguistic tree. We conclude that the Caucasus gene pool originated from a subset of Near Eastern pool due to an upper Paleolithic or Neolithic migration, followed by a significant genetic drift, probably due to the isolation in the extremely mountainous landscape. So basically, what we see is that Near Easterners are really sort of like a sub-branch of Caucasians, and Caucasians got isolated in the Caucasus Mountains, but Near Easterners are really not that different from a Caucasian, genetically speaking. So Near Easterners, as I just said, are technically just a subset of Caucasians. Now, what's interesting about this is that haplogroup J is highest among Caucasians, and haplogroup J is among Near Easterners. But the NAC Dagestani, Chechnyans, and English, and they have a tradition of descending from Hurrians and Uratrians. This is from the Chechnyans. Some authorities believe that the NAC nation was an offspring of the Hurrians and Uratrian builders of magnificent civilizations in the Near East that had profound influences upon the other cultures of the region. It is certain that the NAC constituted an important component of the Hurrian Uratrian tribes in the Transcaucasus and played a role in the development of their influential cultures. Despite the obscurity of their origins, the Hurrians became one of the great and influential peoples of the Near East from the 3rd millennium BC to the 14th century BC. Their original homeland was probably the South Caucasus down to the Armenian Plateau and the Zagros-Tartars Mountains. Later, they expanded to Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and northern Syria. The Hurrian language was neither Indo-European nor Semitic, but was akin to the Northeast Caucasian languages, or the Aldoan languages descendant of Uratrian, including Chechenian and Luizgian. Hurrian civilization reached its akin in the period from the 16th to the 14th century BC. The generally accepted date for the downfall of Hurrian civilization is 1365 BC. The numerous clans of the Hurrians, such as the Gutis, Hattians, the Kassites, established the Kassite kingdom of Babylon in the 15th century BC. The Kurti, Proto-Kurds, Mitannis, Mushki, and Uratrians formed empires and city-states which bore their name. The Core-Araxes culture is also attributed to the Hurrians. It is generally accepted that a number of small Hurrian states gradually united to form the Empire of Mitanni. So what we see in history basically is that you do in fact have Caucasian populations come into the Near East and form various empires like the Mitanni and the Kassites and the Gutians, and join in with groups like the Hittites and etc. So it does make sense that you will genetically see, or basically that Near Easterners would be a branch of these Caucasian groups from ancient times that came into the Middle East. So that's why you do find Middle Easterners that are basically genetically Caucasian. They descend from ancient Caucasian inhabitants like the Hurrians. So genetically speaking, it's believed that Northeast Caucasian Core-Araxes Hurrians had haplogroup J as well. This paper is called How Eurasia Was Born, and it reads, the Northeast Caucasian language family seems to show clear links to ancient Eastern Anatolia, as most subclades of J1-Z1842 can be linked to the Armenian highlands in present-day Azerbaijan, precisely fitting the exact location of the Core-Araxes culture. Three subclades of it, J1-ZS3042, J1-ZS5658, J1-ZS2872, and J1-Y5353, are widespread among Northeast Caucasian groups, suggest Northeast Caucasian languages to have originated from the Core-Araxes culture, as ancient J1 subclades also seem to have been present in the ancient Levant as well. This supports the existence of the Alduin language family, linking Hurrian to Northeast Caucasian. So we'll use Armenians as an example when looking at Middle Eastern DNA. We know Armenians are a mixture of Hurrian and Indo-Europeans. Just as a recap, this is from Encyclopedia of Indo-European Culture, and it reads, the Armenians, according to Dankov, are an amalgam of the Hurrians and Uratrians, Luvians, and the Proto-Armenian Mushki, who carried their Indo-European language eastwards across Anatolia. Basically, mixture of Hurrians and ancient Europeans. So what is the genetic makeup of an Armenian? So if you were to look at an Armenian DNA test, this is from 23andMe, you can find this on Reddit, their genome would basically be Iranian and Caucasian. Their West Asian will be like 99.2%, but the bulk of their DNA would be Iranian and Caucasian. So Armenian DNA is considered, as I said, Iranian and Caucasian. So who else in the Middle East matches Armenians? So let's look at Iranian DNA results. So this is an Iranian, or a Persian. You can find this on 23andMe, Reddit, and let's just deal with a person who's 90.2% West Asian. Where is most of their West Asian DNA? It's Iranian and Caucasian, which makes a lot of sense. So Iranian DNA is Caucasian and Iranian, but who else in the Middle East matches Iranians? So let's look at Kurdish DNA results. So this is a Kurdish person, 99.8%, whereas most of it is Iranian and Caucasian DNA. This is a Kurdish from Reddit 23andMe. So Armenians, Iranians, and Kurds are all very genetically similar. Most of these populations, by the way, also carry haplogroup J, and Caucasian DNA overlaps with haplogroup J. Here is Caucasian admixture from DotiCAD project, and as you can see, highest portion of Caucasian DNA, and then it goes outwards into the Middle East, and even into parts of the Mediterranean Europe, but it does go into the Middle East. Same thing with J1 and J2. Highest proportions of J1 and J2 will be in the Caucasus, and then it will go outwards into the Middle East. So Caucasian DNA and haplogroup J overmatch each other perfectly. But to summarize everything, there is a Caucasian component in modern-day Middle Easterners, and again, this makes sense from history. We do know that Hurrians, an ancient Caucasian people, were among ancient Near Eastern civilizations like the Kassites, the Mitanni, the Hittites, etc. So with them being so large a number in these ancient Middle Eastern civilizations, obviously they wouldn't have just disappeared. Their descendants will still be there. So a lot of these modern-day Middle Easterners have DNA related to those ancient Caucasians from ancient Near Eastern civilizations. And when companies test for West Asian ancestry, for some reason, it's looking for Caucasian ancestry. I guess it's because you do have a lot of them there, both from ancient times and today. So that could be why, but I feel like they need to branch out a little bit more. But anyways, genetically speaking, Caucasians and Near Easterners are related, and Near Easterners are a subset of Caucasians for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, them coming down in ancient times. But lastly, I want to mention this one interesting fact between these related groups is their phenotype. Phenotypically, all these peoples do kind of look the same if you kind of just take a look at them. So here's an Armenian person. Armenians, they can be kind of tanned to white skinned, but they have the aquiline nose or the hooked or long nose, dark hair, dark eyes. And this is an Iranian person, and they have again a tanned to white skin complexion, dark eyes and dark hair. You can tell from their eyelashes and their eyebrows, and they also have a bit of a aquiline or hooked nose. Same thing with Kurdish people, tanned to white skin, dark hair, dark eyes, and they have an aquiline or hooked nose. And between all three of these populations, Armenians, Iranians, and Kurds, it's all kind of similar, which is interesting. So the Caucasian phenotype, it's simply called Armenoid, to be quick about it. But this is where we end Caucasians in the Middle East, genotype and phenotype. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Don't forget to subscribe and share, click the bell, and leave a comment for any questions you might have, and follow my social media accounts that I mentioned at the beginning of the video for more information. And with all of that out of the way, have a great day and shalom.